Welcome to Honest Money. In today's episode, Warren Ingram speaks to car guru and automotive journalist Francisco Nwamba on all things related to car purchasing. Warren and Francisco touch base on new versus secondhand purchasing, motor plans, the most stolen cars in SA, car upkeep, insider tips, and brands to look out for. Don't forget to subscribe and share if you're enjoying the show.
Welcome to another really interesting and different episode of Honest Money. I'm with Francisco Nwamba, who is a car guru. And we're going to get into cars now, but I think I need to just kind of give a bit of background. Why on earth is Honest Money talking about cars? We think on our show that buying, especially new cars, is kind of a waste of money. So now I've got a car guru on the show, and we don't want to start a fight. So we need to talk about this. Why on earth why are we worrying about cars? And I think I've got two reasons. One, for most of us who work in this country, we need a car. Public transport's a difficult thing. It's massively expensive, and it consumes a lot of our disposable income. Not that cars would necessarily not consume it, but the convenience factors, etc., the return on life from having your own transport is huge. But now we need to be careful then about how we spend our money on cars, what cars we buy. It is a reality that I think, it's my own opinion, I won't put words in your mouth, South African men tend to overspend on cars, more about ego and less about actually just getting from point A to point B. So we have to say, well, there's a financial aspect that makes us want to buy a car, but there's also the need to buy a car to generate income, and then there's a bit of fun and enjoyment. So for me, the last aspect is real. Lots of people love cars and get enjoyment out of cars. Doesn't mean you don't have to spend money there, but I think you have to be careful. So that's my mea culpa before we start, and before you all give me a hard time about why we're talking about cars and why we've got Francisco on the show. So I thought today maybe just to start with, are there ways that people can buy cars intelligently? If they are kind of a bit careful with money and they do want to do the right thing, are there ways and are there sort of insider tips that we can get that will actually help us make the right car purchase?
Definitely. So exactly what you're saying. South Africa, we're in a bit of a predicament because public transport isn't a big thing. So naturally, people now use cars as almost a lifestyle accessory to kind of represent who you are. And with that, it's good, and it's a good thing to achieve, to buy a specific vehicle that you want. But at the same time, it can hurt somebody financially because, like you say, it becomes more about the flash element of it all as opposed to the financial element of it all. So the long-term situation is that we need to actually buy cars in a smart way where it's not going to hurt us in the future. And having experienced having sold cars and at the same time reviewing cars and reporting on vehicles, you kind of get a nice understanding of the automotive industry and what goes on in terms of when people buy cars and how they buy their vehicles. Because in South Africa, it's very much hire purchase. Leasing is growing, but it's not a huge thing. But at the same time, people need to also realize that their interest rate matters, how much they're going to pay for insurance for this vehicle, it matters. So all those factors, as much as perhaps you want a GTI, for instance, but maybe you're going to be in a better off position buying that Comfortline Polo. It's going to be better on your pockets. So I think it's just that whole thing that we want to help people to make the right buying decisions.
Okay, so let's get into some nuts and bolts. I guess our first point we probably agree on, that you don't need to buy a new car.
No. A new car, people want the whole novelty of having a new car because it's a big achievement, but at the same time you look at the values that you lose the moment you drive that vehicle off the showroom floor. So it varies obviously from brand to brand, but at the same time that you are going to lose money on this car, especially if you're going to be buying a vehicle that is not in high demand in the used market. For instance, if you buy yourself a brand new Polo, for instance, it's a very high demand car, so when you do trade it in, you're probably going to find that you're going to be in a better off position as opposed to buying something like a used Volvo or a new Volvo, and then you're going to lose a lot of money on that. So I would suggest that people look into the used car market, and at the same time there are some great deals from a demo perspective where dealerships have registered a vehicle, they use it internally for demonstrations, and at the same time then it does take away that initial depreciation, and then you do find yourself not having to spend so much on a vehicle as opposed to purchasing it for the full price.
Okay, so we say, if you want to be clever with money, scrap the new car idea. It doesn't, that enjoyment of I'm the first person to drive this.
Yeah.
It smells new. Well, demos still smell new. I think I bought my car as a 1-year-old. It still smelled new.
100%.
Come on, there's how much are you going to pay for a smell?
Yeah.
So So I think then what's the next thing that we should be thinking about? And I think the one thing that one comment you made there, which is resonating with me, is if a car is in demand. So how do we know what cars are in demand in that second-hand market? Is there a way, like for someone like me who knows nothing, how would I figure out what's in demand, not in demand?
So nowadays we've got obviously the various car buying platforms. For instance, you've got your Auto Traders, you've got your Cars and because they're the ones that, they are running the industry mainly, they are able to give us feedback in terms of what is popular. So Auto Trader does a report that tells you the most popular vehicles that are sold within the used market. So you can actually use that as a way to identify what would be the best car to buy in that scenario. And at the same time, we've also got the NAMSA figures that come out every single month. So NAMSA will report on how many vehicles are sold in South Africa.
Okay.
There are some manufacturers that don't publish their stats, but for the most part, the main manufacturers do publish their stats. So if the numbers tell you that, a Polo is the most popular vehicle or a Toyota Fortuna is the most popular vehicle, you do know that when you do buy that vehicle, there is going to be demand for it in the used market. The problem comes in is that, you get really good value for money brands, but in the used market, they're not super popular. So when it comes time for you to trade your vehicle in, they're not going to give you the values that you should be getting. They obviously use the book values and the trade values, but oftentimes they'll say, no, because of the lack of popularity, we will have to decrease the value that would give you in the vehicle.
So I want to come to that next my next question, but I've got a kind of a red light flashing in my head, which is Polo and Fortuna.
Yes.
What that sets off in my head is, are those not the most stolen and or hijacked cars as well?
Yes, they are. And it's purely a numbers game.
So are you telling our guys to buy cars that they're going to get taken out of? Come on, Francisco. So is this a real thing? Is it something I should worry about if I'm buying a Polo?
Definitely. You do have to worry about those kind of things. For instance, as you know, the Fortuna is a hot target, especially in places like Johannesburg. Polo, same thing. But as well, it is also a numbers game. So naturally, there are going to be more Polos stolen because they are the car that is sold the most. They sell about 4,000 out of these cars in a month. So it does work out from a numbers perspective. But nowadays, what we've seen, because we also do monitor what happens in the crime side of things of cars, and it's kind of weird what happens, because you get a period of time where it's very Polo heavy, and then there's sometimes where there's niche vehicles that are being targeted. We had a period of time where they were targeting Porsche 911s, for instance, and they were targeting Range Rovers. It's a strange thing. Okay. So you can actually kind of see what's going on in the automotive industry. I definitely think you do need to be aware of cars such as a VW Polo, that you do have to be careful where you leave a vehicle like that, the lifestyle that you live. If you're the kind of person who just does your normal day-to-day thing, you should be fine. But if you're also a person who likes to jolt at night and put yourself in a position, where they could take your vehicle away, depending on what you do, in terms of your lifestyle, I think that's where matters like that become a bit more important. So if you're a joller, I'd say maybe stay away from the high risk stuff. Okay. But if you're the kind of person who's just a commuter, people do drive these cars at the end of the day. So not all of them are getting hijacked, but numbers wise, it does work out like that.
Okay. So if security is a big concern in the back of your mind, maybe avoid the most popular, but then don't go for the absolutely worst sold car as well.
100%.
Because then you might get taken out on financially.
Exactly.
Okay. All right, cool. Thank you. And then the other thing would be for me is the cost of servicing a second-hand car.
Yes.
And so how does that fit in with cars that are sold a lot versus cars that aren't sold a lot? Is there a difference on servicing those cars, getting parts?
It depends, so again, because mass appeal, for instance, I keep going back to VW because they're one of the biggest in our country. When you look at cars like those, they can, from a volume perspective, they'll do often specials for servicing a vehicle like that, because also it's a little 1,400 or 1,600. It's not much to service a vehicle like that. But if you're going to perhaps maybe buy like a little small turbocharged Citroen, for instance, it's going to cost differently to service that. So those are kind of...
Differently is more?
More, yes.
Okay. Cool.
Definitely more. And of course, nowadays, even if you look at the French brands, those are the kind of vehicles that people naturally used to say you're going to wait forever for parts. The situation has improved quite a bit, but naturally those vehicles do tend to be a little bit more pricey to service and just to run from a day-to-day perspective, because parts aren't going to be as easily available as a vehicle that they sell 4,000 to 5,000 units a month, Okay,
interesting. And so in that space, would you get better second-hand deals on those, let's say those French cars. Let's not knock a brand here.
Yeah.
Would they be generally cheaper than the kind of comparable German or Japanese brand?
100%. So in the used market, you'll always find, if you're looking for something small and efficient, if you're looking at something French, you'll always find that those cars are not going to be as high priced as the equivalent German vehicle or the equivalent Japanese vehicle, for instance. And it's again, it becomes just a supply and demand situation. So because not a lot of people are looking to buy a French car or even a Swedish car, again, like you say, we don't want to knock brands, but you are going to be able to, if you're in a position of power when you go to that dealership looking for that vehicle, because they know that there's not a lot of interest in this car. Okay. So chances are they'll probably actually do everything in their power to say, please buy this vehicle, as opposed to, a German vehicle that has got a lot of popularity and they know that they don't have to discount it as much. There's 10 clients looking at this vehicle. At the end of the day, they're going to probably give you much more of a harder time getting a better price for that used vehicle.
As I'm talking to you, I'm landing on my own kind of space to say, well, maybe kind of this. I mean, I never liked the French cars because I always thought they were difficult to work inside. They think differently.
Quirky.
To me. But whereas I guess I can say the Volvos, like to me, they seem like good cars.
Yes.
And if I buy a second-hand one and I go and drill the dealership and give them a really hard time, I might get a great deal.
Yeah.
But when I want to sell it if it's my wife's car in 10 years' time, because she doesn't do cars much, then I'm going to get almost nothing for it.
That's the thing. But you see, what you're saying actually makes a lot of sense to me from a perspective of how long you're going to keep your car. So for me, it becomes a better financial decision if you're going to be keeping your car for a long period of time. Because naturally, South Africans also now, they turn over their vehicles so quickly. So you do end up losing money. But you're going to take a knock once in 10 years as opposed to 4 knocks in 10 years where people are changing their vehicles every 2 to 2.5 years, because naturally people get kind of antsy and they don't want to stay in something. But if you're going to buy that Volvo and take and get it at a good price, now, and then you're going to flog it in the next 10 years, I think to me that makes more sense because you're keeping the vehicle, you're getting the true value out of it, as opposed to in another 2 years' time looking for something else and then you take a knock again and again and again.
And I think that's the key here is, especially if you're married, listen to your wife. Yeah. Because both of us, we've had this experience. Our wives help us to make the sensible car decisions. So I wanted to talk about motor plans, service plans. It's kind of a big aspect of car buying. You always hear people saying, well, my motor plan's about to expire. I'm going to sell my car and get a different car with a motor plan again. Yeah. Now let's take the buying a car and keeping it for 10 years.
Yes.
Is it a dumb thing to keep rotating cars with motor plans? Is it such a big attraction that you should actually keep rotating, or is that a sales pitch?
So a few years ago, I would say yes, motor plan becomes very important, but now we know we've got that Right to Repair Act now that's come into play. And that essentially gives the consumer the power to be able to service their vehicle at any accredited service center, and they don't have to worry about their motor plans or their service plans as much as they used to before. Because essentially, South Africa emulates what other markets do when it comes to their motor plans, that they actually run the motor plans themselves. So for instance, you look at a BMW, a Porsche, they've got a fund that they charge you extra for, and they'll charge you for that motor plan, but it just goes into a fund to make sure that they've always got money to repair your vehicle. But then it kind of works as a good sales pitch for them when you're now running out of your motor plan to say, if you want to stay in this grace period of us, servicing your vehicle for free, it's for free because you've paid for it in the purchase price of the vehicle. But now with that, you're probably going to find prices are probably going to be a bit better with certain vehicles if they're going to give you the option to have it with or without the motor plan. I haven't heard any communication from manufacturers officially doing that yet, but I know in the UK, for instance, you can go purchase a brand new BMW without the motor plan, and you just have your warranty on the vehicle, but your motor plan is either an optional thing. Some markets, they don't even have a motor plan in the vehicle, so you've just got your warranty on it, and essentially that gives you a space for you to be able to take it to whoever you want to take it to service the vehicle. So I would say motor plans were important, but nowadays, as long as you know that you can maintain the vehicle at a good accredited service center, you should be good. But it does also vary from brand to brand, because if you're going to have a fancy German vehicle, to replace parts in that does get very expensive. But at the same time, if you're going to have something that is a bit more efficient to run day to day, and the parts aren't going to be that expensive, I think it's a wiser decision to go for the car that's not going to cost you too much to run.
So I think a key here also that I'm taking out of this is make sure that you're not getting it serviced by your friend under the tree in your backyard. You're getting, if you want to maintain the sales value,
100%.
the resale value.
100%.
So it must be accredited.
Yes.
And then secondly, I'm guessing that you make sure you do the services when you're supposed to. Don't be sloppy there and saying, I'll just wait another 6 months, or do what the requirements are.
In fact, if you've got a maintenance plan on your vehicle and you do skip a service, your motor plan can lapse. So, because they know that by skipping those services, you can get to a situation where they say, no, actually, you're not honoring the agreement of having this motor plan, and that it lapses if you do take too long to service your car in those periods.
So I think we're running out of time, but I always want to give like one nugget of information that someone can't get elsewhere. And you were telling me a while ago about kind of like a sleeper brand of car in South Africa that's building great cars, but it hasn't got that kind of premium branding yet, and so I thought maybe, is there a brand of car in South Africa that might not be kind of flashy and everyone's talking about, but that is offering a great car at a great price, and that represents a positive steal, not a bad steal?
Yes, I definitely think that, nowadays there's no such thing as a terrible car. 10, 15 years ago, in the market, you could find something that was truly bad. But what I
usually had a French accent, is my view, but I'll just put it out there.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm not going to comment on that one.
That's the Warren view, yeah.
Yeah. But, brands that are doing quite well in South Africa, for instance, Suzuki is doing extremely well. It's a brand that South Africans have taken on to quite recently. I think the models that they offer resonate with the younger audience, and they do offer good value because they're not very expensive. We've personally had a Suzuki in the house and we absolutely enjoyed it. Okay. And that was great. And I've had also friends of mine who've driven various Suzukis. Those are very, very good brands. If you have got more of an appetite for something a bit different, Haval is doing quite well. I'm sure most people, when they drive on the road, they'll notice that you do see this brand called Haval. And this is a Chinese brand that actually is partners with, it's the same brand as GWM. Okay. So it's just their luxury side of things. But these guys, in a very short space of time, they've been able to bring vehicles that offer values of cars that will maybe cost 800,000 Rand. I recently reviewed a vehicle that cost about 500,000 Rand, and it had the same features engineered by the same people, because Haval was quite smart. They got engineers from BMW and Mercedes to work on their current products. So the guys who are building their vehicles know what they're doing. And they offer all this value, but at a much reduced price. And because I'm seeing more of them on the road, again, time will tell, but we could get to a situation in South Africa where it's going to be quite a good car to have in the used market, because people are buying them new now. So at some point, they're going to trade them in. So there should be still a decent demand for them in the used market. So I'd say brands to look out for. Suzuki, they've really proven themselves. And at the same time, a new brand like Haval.
Fantastic. I think that's a great insider tip for me. What I'll do is I'll wait a year or two, then pick up the Haval on the second-hand market. Francisco, thank you so much for being on the show. For our listeners, we're also introducing Francisco because we're going to be launching, that's my musical interlude, the only one I'll ever do, Honest Cars. And Francisco will be our host. And we're going to be talking about cars in a lot more depth and a lot more detail in the future. But stay tuned, keep your ears open and your eyes open for the first episode of that. Thanks so much for being on the show, and I look forward to many more chats with you.
Thank you very much, and it's going to be good. I look forward to giving consumers good advice and for us having a jaw.
Great. Thank you for listening to Honest Money. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me on Twitter. My handle is @WarrenIngram. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on Spotify and Apple Podcast. Chat soon.